හරිම සුමුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Sunday the 29th of October 2023. Revenue collection. Government deliberating introduction of a property tax by 2025, reveals State Minister for Finance. Protests. Trade unions set to hold island-wide demonstrations demanding salary increments via upcoming budget. War in second stage. Israel expands its military operations, striking over 450 targets in Gaza. Turkish President Erdogan calls Israeli PM Netanyahu a terrorist.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Ndivadi Amuwata. From Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. We're bringing you live to you AdaDerana English Prime Time, and let me take you straight to your top story tonight. State Minister of Finance Ranjit Siyamalapitiya says after Budget 2024 is presented to Parliament, discussions on a proposed property tax will be held with the intention of bringing it into effect from 2025. Addressing media today, the minister said the property tax came as one of the recommendations presented by the International Monetary Fund, which includes tax reforms to increase government revenue. The minister further said discussions on the matter are still underway and that properties on which the tax will be implemented will be clearly disclosed going forward.
මේක දේපල බද්දක් යෝජනා වෙලා තියෙනවා IMF එකෙන් තාවල මේක ඉතාම ප්‍රගතිශීලී බද්දක්. ප්‍රගතිශීලී බද්දක් කියලා කියන්නේ මේ ගෙවිය හැකියාගෙන් ගන්න බද්දක්. අපි අපේ රටේ කියනවනේ අපි ඍජු බදු වැඩි කරගත යුතුයි වක්‍ර බදු අඩු කර යුතුයි. මේක ඍජු බද්දක්. ඒ නිසා මේක ප්‍රගතිශීලී බද්දක්. ධන බද්ද කියන නම ඔබතුමා පාවිච්චි කරා 1970 කාලේ. විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ ආචාර්ය එන්.එම්. පෙරේරා හඳුන්වා දුන්නා ධන බද්ද කියලා බද්දක්. මීට සමාන බද්දක්. ඉතින් මේක යෝජනා වෙලා තියෙනවා දේපල බද්දක් හැටියට අය කිරීම පිළිබඳව IMF එකෙන් තාවල. ඉතින් නමුත් මේක ඉතාම දැඩිව විශ්ලේෂණය කරලායි කටයුතු කරන්න වෙන්නේ. මොකද මේකට කිසිසේත්ම කෙනෙක්ගේ මේ සාමාන්‍ය දේපල තමන්ගේ නිවස වාහනය ඒ සාමාන්‍ය දේපලක් අයිති වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඊට එහා ගිය සුවිශාල මේ අපේ රටේ හැටියට සාපේක්ෂව දේපල පිළිබඳ තමයි අවධානය යොමු වෙන්නේ. කොහොම වුණත් මේක මේ ශනිකව කරන්න පුළුවන් දෙයක් නෙවෙයි. මේක ඉතාම ගැඹුරු විශ්ලේෂණයකට ගිහිල්ලා ඒ නිසා තමයි මේක 2025ට හඳුන්වා දෙන්න දැනට යෝජනා වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ වගේම මේක අනිත් වැදගත් දේ මේක බොහෝ විට අයවීම සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ පළාත් පාලන ආයතන වලින්. මේ වෙන්නේ විශේෂයෙන් පළාත් පාලන ආයතන වල මේ ආදායම් වැඩිවීම. ඒකත් වැදගත්. මොකද මේ පළාත් පාලන ආයතනයේ ලැබෙන ආදායම ඍජුවම යොද වෙන්නේ ප්‍රදේශයේ දියුණුවට යටිතල පහසුකම් වෙන්න පුළුවන් වෙනත් දේවල් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද ඒ නිසා මේ බද්ද විශේෂ යෝජනා වෙලා තියෙන්නේ පළාත් පාලන ආයතන වල ආදායම වැඩි කර ගැනීම සඳහා. හැබැයි මේක කඩිමුඩියේ ශනිකව අපිට හඳුන්වා දෙන්න ලැබෙන්නේ නැහැ. මේක බොහෝ විට මේ යෝජනා වෙලා තියෙන විදිහටම අපිට කාලය ගන්න වේවි 2025 දක්වා. මේක අපේ රටේ හැටියට සාපේක්ෂව ලොකු දේපලක් තියෙන අයට තමයි ආය වෙන්නේ. ඒකත් මේ යම්කිසි ඉතා සාධාරණ ක්‍රමවේදයකට යන්න වෙනවා මේ ප්‍රතිශතාංශ ඒව තමයි කතා බහ වෙනවා. හැබැයි සාමාන්‍ය ජනතාව කියන්නේ ඍජු බද්දකට අයිතිවාසිකම් නොකියන. ඒ කියන්නේ තමන්ගේ ආදායමෙන් කෙලිම බද්දක් ගෙවිය නොහැකි හැම කෙනාටම මේක අඩු ආදායම් ලාභයට මේක යහපත් හැකියාව තියන අයගේ මේක අය වුණාම මේක අවසාන වශයෙන් පළාත් පාලන ආයතනයේ මේ මුදල් ලැබුණාම පාර හැදෙන්නේ ලයිට් එක දාන්නේ සෞඛ්‍ය ශායනය කරන්නේ ඒ සියල්ලටම ශක්තියක් නෙමෙයි මේක යෝජනා වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා මේක ප්‍රගතිශීලී බද්දක්. සාමාන්‍ය ජනතාවට ඉතාමත් වැදගත්. අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා අයවැයෙන් පස්සේ මේ ඉදිරි සාකච්ඡා ගෙනියන්න.
Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe says that the largest bilateral creditors of Sri Lanka, India and China play a crucial role in Sri Lanka's debt restructuring process. He made these comments while addressing a webinar organised by the Oxford Global Society themed IMF Long Overdue Reforms, Sri Lanka as a Case Study. Meanwhile, joining the discussion, former director of IMF's Institute for Capacity Development and member of the Presidential Advisory Group on Debt Restructuring, Dr. Shamini Kure says that the International Monetary Fund should have played a more critical role in bringing Sri Lanka's external creditors together, as the current power imbalances in the world have complicated and prolonged the discussions of Sri Lanka's debt restructuring program.
Going forward, what do you think are the structural checks and balances required to improve the quality of governance?
The central bank independence is I think, most important reform that we were able to implement. And this new central banking reforms were basically brought into as a bill back in the earlier IMF program in 2017-18, and bill had already been drafted. Unfortunately, with the change of the government in 2019, they thought this would not be the right kind of reforms, and they wanted a kind of a central bank which was having certain weaknesses in terms of independence and governance issues. If you look at central bank in history in Sri Lanka, is obviously central bank independence, and also the people who exercise independence was already available in the central bank. Earlier also, it was mainly the governance and the process of appointments. In the new act, in the law, there are strong provisions to prevent that kind of happening in terms of governance, accountability, independence. It's in terms of appointment of the people to the governing boards, monetary policy boards, and also the checks and balances, responsibility of both the legislature and the executive authority, and also the accountability and the fixed terms to ensure that once the boards are appointed, they have sufficient independence and cannot be influenced, both financial independence and the policy independence, and obviously more strong accountability provisions.
Do you see a role for India and China in the recovery process as Sri Lanka emerges from the past few years of turmoil?
Obviously, India and China both are very important partners, especially when it comes to debt restructuring. Both are our bilateral creditors. China has a big exposure. India also has a significant exposure. We need the support from both. I think we can see one of the reasons why there has been some delay in providing financing assurances, and also going forward, some of the understanding of the restructuring has also been this kind of geopolitical, maybe playing a role there. That's why I think IMF and OCC, Official Credit Coordination, and I know this G20 initiative, as I mentioned earlier, Global Sovereignty Roundtable, trying to bring in kind of a framework and open transfer and procedures and the framework to ensure countries like us, those who are basically having exposure to both the geopolitical powers, and how to move forward without having suffering for longer periods. That's a very important response. I think in our case, we have been able to relatively short time compared to some other countries in the same situation. But I think still it has taken a longer time than what we expected. We hope that things will move, and with the support from both India and China going forward.
One point that was raised just then in your comments, Reza, was the power asymmetry in a post-default. If you could pick out perhaps specific moments or parts of the ongoing process in Sri Lanka that the IMF could have done differently, and what that tells us with regards to the navigation of the complex power dynamics here between Sri Lanka and the other national parties and creditors that are involved here.
I would say there were times, for example, when we had the draft level agreement that happened in September. And, basically it was very hard to corral the debtors together. They were not talking to each other. We had China, we had India, we had, the Paris Club, and they weren't talking to each other. I think the IMF should have got them together. But no, they asked Sri Lanka to get them together. And there is, as Reza was saying, a huge power imbalance. We were writing letters begging the presidents and prime ministers of respective countries to provide the financing assurances. And my response was, where is the IMF? Management of the IMF was far more involved, even including in the Asia crisis. I mean, way more involved in getting the creditors to the table. It wasn't until November, December that we even had a meeting, because we're a little country and we have no leverage. And I was quite upset that they seemed to think that this was Sri Lanka's fault. In this geopolitical kind of difficult situation that you are flagging, the IMF needs to step up more strongly on protecting debtor.
Moving on to other local news, the regional director of UNICEF, Sanjay Wijesekara, held discussions with opposition leader Sajith Premadasa regarding the future of healthcare and education in Sri Lanka. During the meeting, the opposition leader highlighted the active role played by his party in the country's healthcare and education sectors through collaborations with the UNICEF, UNFPA and FAO, and urged the UNICEF to play a pivotal role in improving Sri Lanka's healthcare and education systems.
A meeting between opposition leader Sajith Premadasa and regional director of UNICEF Sanjay Wijesekara took place at the office of the leader of the opposition in Colombo yesterday.
We focus very heavily on the health of mothers and children. So maternal and child health is uppermost in our list of priorities in promoting a health agenda for all Sri Lankans. We also have several programs funded by well-wishers and donors aimed at uplifting health standards and educational standards of the people of our country, especially the children. On the other hand, we have also pioneered various efforts in providing essential medicines and drugs, and also vital life-saving equipment to the state hospital sector. So we are not the normal opposition that has existed in Sri Lanka.
I can see Sajith, you're so familiar with the issues, and certainly I couldn't put it better on the women's nutrition, because we have always been struggling with actual, as you said, the BM body mass index of women, low birth weight, and then growth faltering. So it's interesting for me looking at it from a global perspective that, whereas in many countries, do you see any possibilities of there being some part of a manifesto that cuts across all the political spectrum on these children's issues, child rights issues? And
by and large, there is a consensus. But to what extent the political parties in the democratic process prioritizes are another matter. We are going to sign up to our own social contract with the women of the country and the children of the country and ensure that the specific policy prescriptions are implemented according to a timetable.
Well, Senior Deputy Inspector General Deshabandu Tenakon says the police have already implemented strategic plans to control the growth of organised crime in the southern and the western provinces of the country within the next 6 months. Attending an event in Colombo, he further said that rumours of another attack in Colombo, as revealed by a suspect of the Easter Sunday attacks, are completely false.
පසුගිය දවසක අනුරාධපුරයේ බන්ධනාගාරගත වෙලා ඉන්න පාස්කු ප්‍රහාරයට සම්බන්ධ සැකකරුවේ උසාවියට අරන් යනකොට බන්ධනාගාර බස් රථයෙන් එළියට විසි කරලා තිබ්බා කුඩා කොළ කැබැල්ල. නැවත වතාවක් කොළඹ නගරයේ ප්‍රහාරයක් අපි එල්ල කරන්න සූදානම් කරනවා කියලා. ඒ කොළ කැලේ ලියලා විසි කරලා තිබ්බේ ඒකට අවධානය ගන්න මිසක් එහෙම සත්‍ය තොරතුරක් නෙමෙයි කියලා එළි වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම ඔබ දන්නවා මාධ්‍ය වලින් ලොකු ප්‍රචාරයක් කරනවා මේ පාතාල අපරාධ සම්බන්ධ මේ දවස්වල විශේෂයෙන් දකුණු පළාත ඒ වගේම බස්නාහිර පළාතේ සමහර තැන්වල සන්නද්ධ අපරාධකරුවෝ නැත්නම් තුවක්කුකරුවෝ වෙඩි තියලා පුද්ගලයා ඝාතනය කරනවා. මේ ඔක්කොම මෙහෙවන්නේ විදේශගතව ඉන්න මද්ද්‍රව්‍ය ජාවාරමට නියැලෙන ප්‍රධාන පෙළේ අපරාධකරුවන්. ඒ නිසා ඊටාම ක්‍රමානුකූල අඩපිළිවෙලක් තුල අපි ඉදිරි මාස 6ක විතර කාලය තුල මේ සන්නද්ධ කණ්ඩායම් ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනවා පාලනය කරලා සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම පාතාල ක්‍රියාකාරකම් නැති කරන්න අවශ්‍ය කරන සැලසුම් හදලා ක්‍රියාත්මක කරගෙන ඒ සඳහා ඔබේ ප්‍රදේශවල කප්පන් ඉල්ලන ව්‍යාපාරිකයන් තර්ජනය කරලා මුදල් ලබා ගන්න පුද්ගලයෝ ඉන්නවා. එවැනි අය දන්නවා නම් ඒ සම්බන්ධව සම්පත්දායකෙක් හැට පොලිසියට ඔබේ සහයෝගය ලබා දෙන්න.
Well, island-wide demonstrations by several trade unions are scheduled to be held tomorrow over several demands. The protests will be carried out demanding an allowance of 20,000 rupees or an increase in salaries through the 2024 budget.
Several state sector and provincial service trade unions are set to launch an island-wide demonstration tomorrow, urging the government to fulfill several demands. Accordingly, the demonstrations will commence tomorrow, demanding an allowance of 20,000 rupees or an increase in the salaries through the budget 2024.
ඔක්තෝබර් මාසේ 30 වෙනිදා රුපියල් 20000ක ඉල්ලීම වෙනුවෙනුත් ඒ වගේම අහිමි කළ විශ්‍රාම වැටුප් දිනා ගැනීම වෙනුවෙනුත් කෑම පැයේ දවල් 12:01 ඒ විරෝධතාවයට සම්බන්ධ වෙනවා කළමනාකරණ සේවයේ වෘත්තීය සමිති සංවර්ධන නිලධාරී සේවයේ වෘත්තීය සමිති ඒ වගේම ග්‍රාම නිලධාරී සේවයේ වෘත්තීය සමිති මේ ආදී වෘත්තීය සමිති මේ උද්ඝෝෂණ ව්‍යාපාරයට සම්බන්ධ වෙන්න සූදානමින් ඉන්නවා.
Meanwhile, addressing a media briefing today, the Sri Lanka Trade Union Alliance said The alliance will also join to support the agitations demanding a salary increase as the current economic situation is unbearable for government employees.
මේ මාස 14ක කාලය තුල 100%කින් විදුලි බිල ඉහළ ගිහිල්ලා තියෙනවා. අද මේ රටේ වැඩ කරන ජනතාවට තමන්ගේ මූලික අවශ්‍යතා සම්පූර්ණ කරගන්න බැරි වෙලා තියෙනවා. අපේක්ෂා භංගත්වයට පත් වෙලා රට අතහැරලා විදේශගත වෙන තැනට අද මේ රටේ වැඩ කරන ජනතාව රාජ්‍ය සේවකයා පත් වෙලා ඉන්නවා.
Further, the Family Health Service Officers Association reiterated the need for a salary increase through this year's budget.
රටේ තියෙන ආර්ථික උද්දමනයත් එක්ක ඇත්තටම මදි 20000ක් වැඩි වෙලත්. මොකද විශේෂයෙන්ම පෞල් සෞඛ්‍ය සේවා නිලධාරිනිය ගෙයින් ගෙට යන්න ඕනේ. ගමක් ගමක් පාසා යන්න ඕනේ. විශාල ඉන්ධන ප්‍රමාණයක් ඒ අයට යනවා. එතකොට පෞල් සෞඛ්‍ය සේවා නිලධාරිනිය ලබන වැටුප වියදම් කරන්න වෙලා තියෙනවා සේවාව වෙනුවෙන්. ඒක නිසා අවමය රුපියල් 20000ක් වුණොත් හොඳයි. මේ කරුණු කාරණා සියල්ල අපි මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයේදී ඉදිරිපත් කළා. ඒ අනුව රජයට
Public service trade unions assured a continuous struggle if the demands of the government employees are not met through next year's budget. In the meantime, the Government Medical Officers Association is also expected to conduct protests in the future.
ප්‍රභූ ආරක්ෂාව සඳහා වෛද්‍යවරු නොවැම්බර් 1 වෙනිදා සිට ක්‍රියාත්මක කර පරිදි රාජකාරී කටයුතු වලින් ඉවත් වෙනවා. ඒ ජංගම ගිලන් රට සේවා වලින් දේශපාලඥයින් විසින් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන සංවිධානය කරන ජංගම සේවා සෞඛ්‍ය සායන ආදියට ඉදිරියේදී ඒවයින් පවා ඉවත් වෙන මේ රාජ්‍ය වෛද්‍ය නිලධාරීන්ගේ සංගමයේ විදිහට වෘත්තීය ක්‍රියාමාර්ගයක් ඉදිරියට අපි තීරණය කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒතකොට සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයට මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් දැනුම් දීලා ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඉදිරි තීරණ ගන්න අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. මේ තියෙන පාලනයක් නැති වෙලා මේ රටේ වෛද්‍යවරු මේ රටේ මේ පද්ධතියෙන් ඉවත් වෙලා යාම ඒ හරහා සිද්ධ වෙන අවසානයේදී සිද්ධ වෙන ප්‍රතිපාක වලට අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා ආණ්ඩුව සහ සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශය සම්පූර්ණ වගකීම ගන්න.
Turkish President Erdogan calls Israel criminal and its Prime Minister a terrorist. We'll come back with your details after this break. Welcome back to the news. Police apprehended 3 individuals suspected to be involved in the attempted exportation of 1.5 million rupees from the former chairman of the Public Utilities Commission, Janaka Ratnayaka. Following the complaint lodged by Janaka Ratnayaka with the Kirlapana police, investigations into the matter were handed over to the Colombo Crimes Division under the directives of the Senior Deputy Inspector General in charge of the Western Province. Meanwhile, a retired Senior Deputy Inspector General of Police was arrested by police for driving under the influence of alcohol and causing a multi-vehicle collision. The former Senior Deputy Inspector General of Police has been remanded until the 1st of November as per orders of the Mount Lavinia Magistrate Court. And with that, let's take a look at other local news tonight in brief.
3 people were arrested for allegedly extorting 1.5 million rupees from the former chairman of the Public Utilities Commission, Janaka Ratnayaka. The Kirulapana police received the initial complaint made by the former chairman of PUCSL, alleging that an individual who claimed to have received a contract to assassinate him is currently demanding 1.5 million rupees to spare his life. Investigations into the matter were later handed over to the Colombo Crimes Division as per the directive of the Senior DIG in charge of the Western Province. Meanwhile, a former Senior DIG of Police has been arrested for causing a collision with multiple vehicles while driving under the influence of alcohol. The former DIG's vehicle had reportedly collided with a vehicle parked on the road, which then slammed into a nearby bus. In other news, Sri Lanka Navy seized 5 Indian trawlers and arrested 37 Indian fishermen in Mena and near the Delft Island in Jaffna. The apprehended fishermen and the trawlers were brought to the Talaimena Pier and Kankesanture harbours before they were handed over to the Talaimena and Jaffna fisheries inspectors for further legal proceedings. In the meantime, 2 suspects were arrested along with approximately 104 kilos of Kerala cannabis and a 3-wheeler during a special search operation conducted by the Navy in Jaffna today. The gross street value of the seized Kerala cannabis is believed to be over 41 million rupees. Accordingly, the suspects along with the Kerala cannabis and the 3-wheeler were later handed over to the police for onward legal action.
And we take you to your corporate affairs segment. Associated Motor Finance Company reports a net income of 45.98 million rupees in the second quarter of the financial year 2023-2024. Meanwhile, Bogala Graphite Lanka reports a net income of 77.75 million rupees for the quarter. With that, let's have a look at the corporate sector news in brief.
Associated Motor Finance Company for the second quarter of the financial year 2023 to 2024 reported a net income of 45.89 million rupees compared to 28.54 million rupees a year earlier. Basic earnings per share from continuing operations was 40 cents compared to 25 cents a year ago. For the 6 months, net income was 113.31 million rupees compared to 60.73 million rupees a year ago. Meanwhile, Bogala Graphite Lanka PLC for the third quarter of 2023 reported sales worth 485.57 million rupees compared to 569.98 million rupees a year ago. Net income was reported at 77.75 million rupees compared to 120.27 million rupees a year ago. Basic earnings per share from continuing operations stood at 82 cents compared to ₹1.27 a year ago. For the 9 months, sales were reported at 1.2 billion rupees and the net income was recorded at 67.23 million rupees. In the meantime, Daras honoured NDB Bank as the recipient of the Prime Purchase Performer Award at the Daras Payment Partner Performance Awards 2023. This award acknowledges NDB Bank's achievement of generating the highest revenue per customer while maintaining a minimum transaction count of 30,000. The Daras Payment Partner Performance Awards are an annual celebration of payment partners and seek to reward and recognize the contribution of bank partners towards the success of the platform's business model.
And in your top business news, Sri Lanka's Hambantota port had transshipped 500,000 vehicles from roll-on, roll-off vehicles by September 2023, a goal it reached only by November in the previous year. Chief Operating Officer of Hambantota International Port Group, Tissa Vikramasinghe, said as global economy recovers gradually, the firm continues to aggressively market its location and service. As a result, the roll-on, roll-off transshipment service is steadily increasing at the Hambantota International Port and have been able to better the volumes year on year. In 2022, the full year volume was 528,000 vehicles after topping 500,000 only by November last year. But this year, 500,000 was reached at the end of the third quarter compared to the previous year, that's last year. The port has seen a 25% increase in roll-on, roll-off vehicles. Welcome back to the news. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that the second phase of the war had begun as his forces aim to destroy Hamas in what will be a long war. During the past 24 hours, the Israeli Defense Forces struck over 450 targets in Gaza. Meanwhile, addressing a rally held in Turkey supporting Palestine, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu a terrorist.
During the past 24 hours, the Israel Defense Forces struck more than 450 targets, including command centers, observation posts, and missile launch sites, as Israel steps up its operation in Gaza. In a statement, the Israel Defense Forces said, as a part of the expansion of ground activities, combined combat forces struck terrorist cells that attempted to attack the forces and terrorist cells that planned to carry out anti-tank missile launches. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared yesterday that the second phase of the war had begun as his forces aim to destroy Hamas in what will be a long war.
This is the second stage of the war whose goals are clear: to destroy Hamas's governing and military capabilities and to bring the hostages home.
Further, IDF spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said Israel forces went into the Gaza Strip and expanded the ground operation where infantry, armor and engineer units and artillery with heavy firepower are taking part.
For your immediate safety, we urge all residents of northern Gaza to temporarily relocate south. This is a temporary measure. Moving back to northern Gaza will be possible once the intense hostilities end. Hamas puts your life in danger by placing weapons and forces within.
So far, the death toll in Gaza has risen to 7,960. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, the enclave has been pummeled by Israeli strikes since October 7, which has also resulted in over 20,000 being injured. The ministry added that nearly 73% of those killed are from vulnerable populations, including children, women, and elderly individuals. Further, the ministry stated that the total number of dead includes 116 medical personnel. Meanwhile, massive protest rallies took place in several countries, calling Israel to stop its attacks on Gaza. Addressing a rally held in Turkey, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a terrorist.
Just as Netanyahu is a terrorist, the opposition says Hamas is a terrorist organization as well. Shame on you. Israel, we will declare you as a war criminal to the world. Right now we are making preparations for this.
However, in response, Israel recalled its diplomats from Turkey after the Turkish president spoke out against Israel during a pro-Palestinian rally. Meanwhile, in Sri Lanka, the post-mortem conducted on the remains of the deceased Sri Lankan in Israel confirmed that her death had occurred due to a gunshot. This morning, her remains were brought to her residence in Kelaniya. Minister of Labour and Foreign Employment Manusha Nanakkara paid his final respects to the deceased Sri Lankan today. According to the family sources, the final rites will be performed at 4 p.m. tomorrow at the General Cemetery in Wevalduwa.
And that's all for tonight. Good night.